welcome to another edition of the American College of Healthcare Architects Master Series 2.0. Today we'll be discussing what I think many will find to be a very relevant and timely topic, innovations in project delivery and the impacts of those alternate project delivery methods on the healthcare environment. I'm Daniel Perchbacher. I'm a principal in the healthcare practice of HMC Architects in California, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Angela Mazzi.
Daniel, always a pleasure. My name is Angela Mazzi. I am a partner at GBBN Architects, and I'm based in our Cincinnati office.
And now that you've met Angela and I, let's meet the rest of our panelists. Paul is a registered architect and interior designer with extensive knowledge of and involvement in all aspects of healthcare design and construction, from initial land and facility planning through design and construction administration. He received his Bachelor of Architecture degree in 1981 from the University of Oregon School of Architecture and Allied Arts. Previously, Paul served as a member of ASHI's Healthcare Construction Certificate Task Force and was a board member of the Missouri Society of Healthcare Engineers. His recent healthcare speaking engagements include presentations at the ASHI PDC Conference, AIA Academy of Architecture for Health webinar, the China Hospital Construction Conference, and guest lecturing at Texas A&M College of Architecture. He also has been a contributor to healthcare security panels and presentations for healthcare disaster preparedness. Much of Paul's 41-year career has focused on collaborating with healthcare systems, private developers, and physician groups on building ambulatory healthcare facilities. Most recently, Paul has been working with Fortune 500 companies expanding their presence in Mexico and working with them to improve the health and safety of their employees. Sara Heppe is a principal at a predominantly healthcare-focused architecture firm called PF&A Design. She is a recipient of this year's Emerging Leaders Scholarship from the Women in Healthcare organization. She has been focused on healthcare design for over a decade. Her collaborative and creative approach to project management allows for ingenuity to meet aggressive project goals. Kurt Spiering is an industry leader with extensive programming and planning experience, and most recently served as vice president and chairman of the board of a national architecture firm. He is a recognized pioneer in lean, integrated project delivery, and prefabricated design solutions for the healthcare industry. Spiering has led the planning and design of numerous new hospitals and additions for major healthcare systems across the country, including Allina Health, Abbott Northwestern, Froedtert Health, Johns Hopkins, Northside Hospital, SSM St. Louis University, UPMC, and Virtua Health. Today, Kurt supports health systems in strategic planning and pre-design services, including visioning, master planning, and strategic programming.
And I have to say, I love this topic because it really can be a linchpin into what helps a project be feasible and get the logistics through. So the first question I wanted to ask is, how are we defining alternative delivery? It is a term that we hear a lot of people play fast and loose with. And once we define it, how's the industry moving towards that? What can that possibly look like? And Kurt, why don't we start with you? How do you define it?
Well, if you look at traditional, maybe the best way is to define, the traditional delivery systems and methods using, the 5 phases in the AIA contract, looking at design, bid, build, and construction documents as sort of the formal way of structuring a relationship. And then also looking at the relationship between the architect and the general contractor or construction manager being in some ways adversarial in the way the contracts are currently written, where we each check on each other to make sure that we keep each other in line. So if you think about that as more of the traditional sort of landscape, then I think you will look at alternative methods that enhance collaboration, enhance speed to market, decision-making, et cetera. And there are many forms that takes.
The standard definition of traditional design, bid, build is probably what most markets would consider traditional design and construction. And like Kurt said, it really does, while it creates what's supposed to be checks and balances, can sometimes create obstacles to coming up with a holistic solution, and sometimes creates unnecessary roadblocks to completing the project on time. It can sometimes generate a lot of time delays, issues with quality, and even ballooning budgets, unfortunately.
Yeah, to pick up on what Kurt and what Sara said, for me, alternative delivery, project delivery is any relationship contracting method. So whether that's design build, progressive design build, ICC, IDP. I think anything that is highly collaborative and non-adversarial, it could have an accelerated schedule component, may not. It could have shared design efforts between the design teams and the contractor and subcontractor. Some of us are calling that buildable design. I think one aspect is the technology aspect. I think we need to have a transparent, shared, kind of single source of truth data platform that starts in the planning and design phase and carries through to construction, and then hopefully is carried on into the life cycle of the project and the building, and for maintenance and for enhancement for the owner in the future. So those are how I would define alternative delivery.
Yeah, one other thing that I don't think we pointed out is the handoff that happens, where there's a loss of knowledge. And that probably is one of the number one issues with the traditional design bid build is you kind of design in a vacuum and then you hand off to the contractor. And there's a lot that can either be misinterpreted or misunderstood on both sides, right? We're all guilty of it, where we'll design something that may or may not be feasible or achievable, or what we designed has unintended long lead times or cost implications based on what the market rates are for that point in time or where we are. So all those atypical design delivery models really kind of bring the whole team together, right? And it reduces that adversarial conflict, but it also, hopefully, there, with not having that handoff, there's less loss of knowledge, right, as you move from one phase to the next.
I think that there's a competitive advantage through traditional methods, but there's really a collaborative advantage through these alternative methods.
Yeah, and no doubt. And to pick up what Sara said, there's just a lot of inherent waste in the traditional delivery method. And from a digital standpoint, just from an information standpoint, we the design team are creating a design model that gets tossed over a wall to the contractor. Contractors rebuilding that model, subcontractors are then rebuilding fabrication models. And every time there's just information is lost, and it takes time to recreate that information, and design attention is lost, and time is spent doing that. The owner's money is spent doing that. So how do we break down those silos between all the phases of the project, all the contributors to a project, and how do we get toward a more enhanced integration or enhanced delivery process that really looks for those opportunities to suck out waste, tear down silos between all the stakeholders in a project.
Sarah, maybe I can start with you. So we're crafting a contract in a process that encourages relationships and collaboration, which we think are going to make the project more successful, achieve better schedules, better cost control, better quality for our client and the patients and the end users at the end of the day. So maybe we can get a little more tactical on examples from our experience. And Sara, let's start with you. On your past collaborative contracts or delivery methods, could you share some of the insights that you gained in that, and how did your team increase quality, improve your schedule through building relationships and collaboration?
Right. So I think we're all familiar with design build, IPD, CM at risk. But actually, I feel like the most unique projects that I've been involved with that achieve a speed to market and cost reduction We have a very specific client who has a really unique approach to their design build inherently, right? So, but the project actually starts during the proposal process, and they actually pay for the proposal. They pay all teams. So it starts with a qualification section. So there are pre-selected architects, engineers, and GCs, and you have to team as an AEC team. That team then has to present a project for that specific RFP, and you get paid to present, which takes a little bit of the risk off of our team. We're still in the hole, but it lets you work as a full design build team to come up with innovative solutions. And for this client, cost and speed to market are paramount. To kind of fast forward as like an example of how fast are they really going. One project we were awarded last December 1st, so December 1st, 2022. I just punched out on Monday the final floor, and it's about 30,000 square feet of 56 new ICU beds. We completed the design documents in 6 weeks for the whole thing after award. And even the procurement contracts that the owner has in place are very unique. And we were actually able to have all product that we needed on site no later than April of this year. And again, they turned over just recently the final floor. So to do 30,000 square feet for a brand new ICU, not a fit out, right? We gutted 2 floors, 56 new beds, permitted, in place, operational in less than a year from award. That's pretty fast.
Yeah, no kidding.
So yeah, we're doing the same process again right now. But this has kind of become their standard. So that what they gain from the proposal is pretty brutal for the design teams. But what the owner gains is a lot of different concepts, right? So instead of choosing someone in a vacuum without much documentation, other than saying, we've done this before, we can do it again, trust us with all your money, they host a competition. It's a design competition. Who can solve our problems the best? And then they award to the team, and it includes not only your ideas, but also how fast you can get it to market, any innovative way you can come up with. Also, and of course, this is an existing facility, so how does it impact existing patient care, and how are you mitigating those issues? The procurement piece that is also very important on how they beat lead times is that the owner is very engaged with their own construction. They have standardized a lot of products across their hospital, so much so that they actually contact vendors and consistently get quotes for bulk product. So they'll order a certain volume, and the contract is good for 3 to 5 years. So you either use all the product and then renegotiate the contract, or renegotiate when the year is up. It helps price fixed for them. They get a reduction in price across the board because they're having all these different manufacturers compete for the contract because it's huge, right? For example, if this specific client were to have the GC order an exam light, it would be $10,000 a light. When they order with the procurement contract, it comes out to be about $800 a light. They have historically procured sliding doors, flooring, solid surface, lighting, but really anything is on the table as far as their standards go. And what that also means is when they order and set these contracts in place, most manufacturers go ahead and make the product so that they don't lose money in the future when this client places an order because it costs more to use that material. So they make everything in advance, which means when the client calls and says, I need this many units of whatever material, it's on your site in a week, which is pretty incredible. So it is unique. I've never seen another client do it, but I think it is incredibly successful with reduction in cost. And I will say, not only is speed to market impressive, the cost for the project is historically about a quarter or a third cheaper overall compared to traditional construction models. Still trying to evaluate if that's because of time saved or if it's because of, money saved on markup and overrun. So we're looking into that now.
Sara, how did you kind of balance standardization with stakeholder needs, stakeholder input? That's, to me, seems to be a big challenge because, obviously healthcare is a building type that could benefit from high levels of standardization. But it also, we as design teams have also, pressed for high levels of user input at the same time. So how do we kind of move toward, a manufacturing model which allows for infinite options, but standard products,
Yeah, and I will say you kind of hit the nail on the head there, right?
Mm-hmm.
This particular client controls, there's a very thick filter between their construction and facilities team and their users. The users are involved, but only to a certain point, and the feedback window is limited. Of course, we have things that come up during construction, especially because it's an existing facility. But really, from what the biggest difference I see is, we'll have other clients who will make wholesale changes to the function of the floor during CA. That doesn't happen here, which is very interesting. And the other thing to note too is this group has almost had to implement this because of the population that they serve, right? It's very low income, all sorts of things. And so they've and I think what everyone has kind of agreed to is that standards are better than not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
And if we can save money and roll it out across the board, that's better than wasting money and not being able to do anything.
I'd like to share an example that was probably brought on by COVID. For sure it was during the COVID process. Worked with them in a pre-manufactured state where we didn't have a choice. No one was fabricating. So we had to pick standard items to put together unique acute care, intensive care rooms, isolation rooms with off-the-shelf items. And we had to be quite innovative in how we designed the space. But the end result was within 4 months, we could design modules, prefab them, ship them to the site, and they were up and operating 72 intensive care beds at Northside Hospital in Atlanta to meet the needs of COVID. Now, there was a little different time and everybody was singularly focused, but at the same time, it proved the power that you stated, Paul, which is standardization and sort of innovative ways of using standard products might be the wave of the future to be able to cut costs and speed to delivery.
Yeah, I will say, so this is a client that knows what they want, knows what they need, and has made a commitment to certain products across the board. That being said, they still renegotiate all the time with their product vendors to keep them honest. If a product fails, they threaten to cut the contract due to, not meeting the needs of the agreement. But let's say you're in a situation where it's a brand new service line for a group. You do need a lot of user input. An example, we've done, I say IPD light, right? kind of more of a CM at risk model, where we implemented lean processing, but heavy on prefabrication options, where basically heavy lean processing, about a 2-year process with the users. And there was an overlap, right? About 18 months into the design, we started construction, and we had prefabricated the skin. We prefabricated the central utility plant. We prefabricated all above ceiling racks with multi-trade racks, certified and delivered on site, and basically puzzle pieces. And we also prefabricated the electrical room. So for a 14-story building, brand new out of the ground, we completed construction from the beginning of construction within a 2-year window, because once the building was enclosed, the electrical rooms were already in place and plugged in. They could power the cup above, and all multi-trade racks were already installed and cooling and drying the building. It chopped off about 8 months of construction if you would have done it in a traditional design bid build way.
I love these strategies that kind of deal with market volatility by either using speed to market strategies or off-the-shelf strategies, and everything we've heard, such a compelling case, but not everybody believes in these more integrated approaches to design and construction. So Paul, let's start with you. What advice would you give owners and facility managers to convince their leadership to take this strategy to heart and to try to implement some of these market innovations?
Well, you gave me a hard question, so I wrote down some notes. So I'm going to look down at my notes while I'm talking here. So, for me, healthcare organizations, healthcare leadership are already, very familiar with operating on the slimmest of margins, right? So, the benefit is that they're already functioning in a world of discomfort. And with inflation on the rise, the leadership, I think of the organizations know that they need to keep their eyes fixed on what they can control inside of their organizations. And for me, reducing volatility means, going from how you do more with less to doing more with even less, right? So you're really, you're taking those slim margins and really doing more with even slimmer margins. What they can control, though, is the relationship with innovative partners in the design and construction and operations world, okay? So that being said, we, the design teams and construction teams, really need to take a hard look at ourselves, okay? And, there's problems that reside in our industry. We're very, very, very innovative in our own silos, but we need a holistic approach to delivering projects. Right now, there's an accepted 30% rework in the construction process. And, so that's a number that you can apply, or a percentage you can apply a dollar amount to. And, right now, our typical deliverable is still, a set of keys, O&M manuals, bricks and mortar, and a big bucket of problems, so we need to be more responsible partners to our healthcare owners about the projects that we deliver. And we do all that while, the design teams, design and construction is undervalued, or design and engineering is undervalued, and we do it to ourselves, and we remain kind of a line item in that commodities, and get hit with the commodity service stick. So an advice I would give is they need to further embrace discomfort. That's what the facility teams and the leadership teams need to do, with the understanding that there's a better way to streamline these workflows, and data in construction and from construction into life cycle. So we talk a lot about in our own company and companies we collaborate with, and and kind of company and industry advisors is, how do you use data for real-time analytics on a project? Okay, so how do you, we're building the project with the end in mind, right? So you're starting the design, understanding what the needs of the client are, what the needs of the contractor are, the subcontractor, the vendors, the stakeholders, the facility managers, the AHJs, everybody looking at the project. We start building that model with the end in mind, and you're consolidating content, intelligent content throughout the project lifecycle. And that continues on through construction, and our teams are managing that data flow through a common data environment, a common data platform. And the idea is that you take that early in the project and you move it all the way through the project. And that can be applied to design build, into integrated project delivery, into aggressive forms of design build, what have you. But what we're seeing, we're thinking about how we use data intelligently, how we use data in a responsible way for value and bring value to the client and to the project. How we use data to create buildable design, which is the integration of design intent with fabrication, so that what we design actually can get built, can actually get fabricated, in less expensive ways. And with 85% of the costs of a project, really, or cost of a building really occurring after turnover, right? It's the long-term operations of a building. We have to attack silos and view things through a holistic lens, instead of capital projects coming from one bucket of dollars and operations from another bucket of dollars. So we need to kind of combine those ideas of construction and operations. In a lecture I gave at Texas A&M, I like to say, what we do and how we do used to be two different things. What we did, we designed and how we did it was a whole different. And now those two things are, so how equals what, or what equals how. Those two things are now the same thing. So we need to think about that, at the same time. And ultimately, innovative partners will find innovative design and construction teams, and a new path will be forged ahead. Something's got to give. There's $13 billion, or 13%, excuse me, of global GDP is construction right now. And according to a great presentation by McKinsey & Company at the Reimagining Construction Summit, the GII Summit, they really identified two big risks. One is lack of investment in upfront planning and design, and the second one is continued adversarial contractual relationships. And in order for construction to really catch up to manufacturing, which is 4.6% or 4.6 times more productive than construction, there's got to be big structural changes on how we do what we do and how our industry does what it does.
That is a really important point, that it's not just first cost, but it is operation costs. And we need to break down these silos. The idea of looking at it from almost a lean perspective about where's the waste, where's the overwork and overperforming. Those are really important points. Kurt, have you, in your experience, tried any of these strategies? What are you finding convinces people to take on these innovative methods?
Well, I'd build on what Paul said. I absolutely agree with the content. I would add that clients maybe, depends, also can be regional. East Coast clients are extremely stuck on hard bid because they want to know they got the lowest responsive price. But where West Coast clients are a little more open because of speed to market being important and some other, regulatory authorities slowing down the process, their speed and timing is far more critical. So it depends on the client need and the reason why they're looking at these alternative delivery methods. But in general, my criticism would be that they'd be optimizing the part and not the whole. So if we can get to the lowest bottom line price and we save $500,000 in the process, but it costs us 6 months longer in design time, and we can't open and operate earlier, that's lost revenue. So we have to look at the big pie and not maybe necessarily the small pie when we're trying to sell some of these alternative costs. There's no real way to know on any specific line item whether we got the lowest responsive price. You can do price checks, but in general, that's not the issue. The issue is the elimination of waste in the process, which is far greater than whatever that competitive advantage might be on a single individual item. So I think we have had some discussions with clients in that regard. We've done 3-party forms of agreement with the owner, the architect, and the constructor. The issue there is the owner doesn't necessarily like to give up the recourse they might have for the success of the team. And so insurance policies and programs start to be also a sticking point on going to a true IPD integrated form of delivery because the owner's involved in that process. So working through those issues, those are all solvable through project agreements and umbrella agreements, but going through that process with the owner, but at the end of the day, convincing them that looking at the overall cost, to Paul's point, of the building and operations and speed to construction and speed to market overrides maybe small savings along the way that might accrue.
Yeah, Kurt, as you think about optimizing the whole, I love the way you said that, optimizing the whole, not just a part, but, in our industry right now, we're kind of living through a triple threat of, rising escalation. We have supply chain issues for our clients, and on the build side, we have a shortage of skilled labor in our industry, which is making everything kind of go haywire. So what does alternate delivery have to offer in those cases as we think about the whole enchilada, not just schedule in particular or cost as a generic line item, but as we start to really get down to some of the construction industry challenges that we're all living through right now?
Well, I go back to Sarah's example on the project she stated on the quick delivery and the savings and pre-purchase of items and agreements. Yeah, sometimes you go back to the history of why things came up to be, you learn a lot about what the advantages should be. So IPD was done primarily for speed to market. It wasn't actually done for lowest bottom line cost, right? And we just talked about that. When you think about construction management, if you go back through history books, construction managers were really supposed to do exactly what Sara said the organizations are now doing. Pre-purchase, mass standard items, be able to group purchase and group buy and spread that across all of their clients. Well, lo and behold, they took over the role of the general contractor, but very few of them really looked at those cost savings that could generate through those group purchase agreements and pre-ordering materials ahead of time. I do think prefabrication, and I'll use the term fabricate and erect versus construction, is something that is going to be a transformative event that's already beginning to happen. Most hospitals are, depending on the facility, 25 to 35% prefabricated already. Things like head walls, MEP racks, toilet rooms. Those are the easy, low-hanging fruit out there. But even more advanced systems of prefabrication and erection on site are going to solve some of the problems you're talking about through pre-ordering, pre-purchasing, getting group agreements around lowering unit prices, about being able to build the interior wall systems while we're erecting the exterior, compressing construction schedules, so we no longer have to be dry to build out the interior. There's just a number of things I think that prefabrication has or holds. Also, being able to build those be able to prefabricate in areas that have affordable and plentiful labor is something we can shift to work to where the labor is and then assemble on site. We think about this sometimes in urban areas, but also in rural areas. There's quite a problem in large projects and moving construction crews to rural areas as well as urban areas. So I think it has a universal appeal and a universal approach. So I'm pretty high on prefabrication as a way of doing business, but not necessarily that we're going to just stamp out the same widgets, but that we can, someone, I think one of the prefab said, look, through digital technology, it's like making a copy. I can make 100 individual copies as fast as I can make 100 copies of the same thing. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to lose creativity and innovation. It could actually spur greater levels of creativity because of our ability to pre-manufacture to more precise, shapes and sizes.
Mm-hmm. In addition to that, quality. So, how many instances have you seen where this panel requires a certain adhesive that needs to set for a certain amount of time? And of course, you never get it if you put it on site, right? It has to be up tomorrow. So we've even seen quality increase dramatically with prefabrication and also precision, right? Where on site you kind of lose that. I saw a job where they actually built a factory on site to prefab exterior panels that were too large to ship over the roadways. Mm-hmm. So they went ahead and they built a factory on site to do it. So there are a lot of different techniques out there that are starting to emerge that are really exciting.
Yeah, it's a good point. UPMC, a 636 bed tower in Oakland, Pennsylvania, which is just off the suburb of Pittsburgh on the Pitt campus. Very tight urban site. They did a prefab shop a mile out of town and did exactly what you were talking about. But the benefit of that was they also instituted training programs for underserved populations so that people could come into that factory and begin to also learn trades to help build, skilled trades in urban areas as well. So a lot of good things can really come from that concept or single idea.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out, which is interesting, we've kind of touched on it, is this idea of life cycle cost. And you would think that it would be inherent to a healthcare organization because they're actually required to produce life cycle cost analysis for all of their medical equipment. Well, why don't they ask us to do that for the buildings? I've seen so many scenarios where air handling units have been allowed to fail. It starts to cause corrosion of not just the finished materials, but also the steel sometimes, where it can have this compounding effect of, neglect of maintenance causes ballooning costs later on down the road. That's a recommendation we've been giving to our clients, is to require a life cycle analysis of the design teams.
Yeah, it's a good point. Even from a standpoint of sustainability, when we look at, oftentimes construction managers and builders look at the percentage of waste, how many pounds of product do they bring into the building and how much do they take out as part of the waste system. Prefabrication reduces that greatly. So when we look at the most sustainable building is the one we don't build, so to speak. A lot less waste when we are more predictable. We look at modular, we look at standardization and prefabrication.
So with all this, is there a downside to choosing alternative delivery? What have you experienced that could go wrong, Sara?
Specifically IPD, as an example, there's a lot of trust that's involved in that three-way triangle. and it is very true. If the trust is not there, things can kind of go off the rails, right? And that's when you get back to, even though the historical contractual models are more adversarial, they do make people feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to maybe controlling costs a little bit more. So trust is one big one. And then, the other concern for design build, for example, that what you always hear an architect say is, well, we lose control. So it's not as good of a product because we get beat down and we have to give the cheapest, we have to create something cheaper in order to meet the cost requirements of the owner, which I think is an overstatement. It doesn't have to be that way. But that is kind of a general idea, and it can happen if you let it. see them at risk, and it's maybe my kind of best of both worlds. But you do, it's not low cost, right? And maybe that's what it kind of all boils down to. Usually most of these other methods, if you were to compare it to the initial base bid options, they look more expensive, but we all know by the time you get to the end of a design bid build job, usually there are a good number of change orders that if you compared it back to the beginning, it's not necessarily a cost savings at all. So
when you asked that question, and before Sara answered, I wrote down one word, that was trust. So we're on the same page as far as when it goes bad, what goes bad. But sometimes the owners can set up adversarial relationships by how we do our contracts. Yeah. And also sometimes owners are not necessarily don't want to be that third partner engaged in decision making. So that's another area where we need to make sure that these core teams, which generally are owner, architect, contractor, we also might involve some of the prime subcontractors in a risk sharing agreement. In some cases, there's incentives for good performance, but there's also some penalties for bad performance. And so being able to weigh that, and then, but having a really well-defined and well-working core team with trust, I think, and then transparency of information is maybe the other, what can go wrong if people start not bringing costs to the table or aren't transparent in some of their information flow. We've had owners reps that wouldn't show us the budget. Well, it's pretty hard to hit a budget when you don't know what it is. So being transparent and open and honest, and then collaborative problem solving, I think, are the keys. And when they go wrong, it's when some element of the team isn't acting in good faith.
So, Paul, let's hear from you. How can alternative deliveries go wrong? What downsides or challenges do people need to be looking for so they can avoid them?
I think like what Kurt just said, for IPD as an example, one person, one individual, one poor performer, whether it's in, company or, can really impact the entire project, right? So, you have to select a great team, and, and a group consensus decision-making, everybody, spending time as one large team making decisions can certainly slow things down. And so some clients, some owners might be frustrated, with that process, or, may not be naturally comfortable in a highly collaborative environment, and, may not like giving up part of their authority, to other parts of the project team in that decision-making process. Also, like Sara said, higher project costs, are, maybe due to some shared risk, and also the incentives that come along with a shared agreement as part of IPD. So, those are some disadvantages of definitely of IPD. Some disadvantages with, progressive design build, which we haven't talked a lot about. You're awarding a contract without any competition, and I think a lot of clients, can be uncomfortable with that, right? You're really selecting a team based on qualifications, not on cost, right? And you could have some complexities with how you procure subcontractors, based on where you are in the country, and whether they're open shop or union shop kind of projects. There's termination options in progressive design build, which allows the contract or the owner to kind of to terminate the contract. However, there, it's that option can make owners a little uncomfortable, because then, what do you do with the project on the other side of that? If you close down a project, or you decide you don't like, the arrangement with the, with the design team and the construction team. And, these are unfamiliar contracts to a lot of, still, which I don't believe, because I've been doing design build for 40 years. My first firm out of school was a design build firm. And, so, but there's still, like Kurt said, depending on where you are in the country, there's still lots of owners and lots of situations where you have teams that are not familiar with accelerated project delivery, alternative project delivery, collaborative project delivery. And, so it's how do they get out of their, how do we help them get out of their comfort zones? Because that can certainly determine whether they want to proceed more traditionally or more collaboratively in these alternative methods. And one last thing, you got to have the right team on any of these alternative delivery processes. You have to have a team that knows what they're doing and has done it before, and also has good team chemistry. I think I heard the word trust, heard collaboration, I heard transparency. Those are all good words because, and those are words I've written down time and time again when talking and thinking about this subject. Because if you don't, if you don't have, a trust between everybody that, that we're all moving in the same direction toward a shared goal, then, it doesn't matter whether it's a traditional or an alternative delivery method, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, when we're thinking about collaborative delivery methods, everybody in there, what could go wrong as far as trust and relationships and how you're, intertwining these at a minimum 3 different entities, right? The design, the build, and the owner. A lot of it does go down to the owner and what they're internally capable of doing and evaluating their own team and their comfort level with the level of engagement, because both things are true. And I've seen it in my experience too. On the one hand, it's a little uncomfortable to lose control. And on the exact same project, you're actually seeing a lot more sausage made than you've ever seen before. And that makes you uncomfortable too. So you both lose access to the levers that you traditionally have to pull, but you're seeing a lot more decisions made than you're normally accustomed to. So Sarah, let's start with you. What advice do you give your clients as they're looking at different delivery methods? Maybe they know design, bid, build, the traditional adversary relationship. They know that's not what they want to do. And then they look out into the sea of alternative deliveries and they see progressive design build, traditional design build, integrated project delivery, you see them at risk. What sorts of differentiation do you place on these as you're advising your clients on where they want to go and how they want to go with an alternative delivery method? Help them make a decision.
Right. Really what we try to help them focus on is, it's really more getting rid of the stereotypes, right? And the stereotype is that design, bid, build is the cheapest, safest option that delivers quality. And in my personal opinion, that is no longer true. What you get with design, bid, build is you get a base bid, lowest cost that will change order you to death. And that 30% number I would actually agree with. It'd be interesting to go back and look and kind of take like a historical data approach to see if that's true or not. So if your goal is better team collaboration, higher quality, faster speed to market, and reduced cost, it's a no-brainer to consider some of these other options, right? And the other thing that we have done is shown data, right? Like anonymous historical project data to support those claims. So that's how we do it here.
I'd say that, agreeing with everything you said, that setting expectations early, one of our goals, I think, as a team leader with your clients is to set those expectations early so that there are no misunderstandings or disappointments at the end. And then knowing what's the critical aspect of their project. We had a client that came to us that said, I need competitors moving across the street is opening a cancer center. Well, and they're going to be open in 14 months. Well, from that statement to opening their cancer center, we used a full IPD 3-party agreement. No, did open book policy with a markup for the general contractor. We opened in 12.5 months. Okay, that was a speed to market issue. Was it the lowest possible price? Maybe not, but it was speed to market. If you've got a client that has a scope issue that says, I really need to know early what my costs are so I can build as much as I've got more need than I have money, you know, you may want to look at something with target value design and some early cost estimating that provides reliability to be able to scope that project early in the project by bringing CMs and others on board and working in a collaborative manner. So I think it depends on what your needs are as to which one of these alternative systems, you know, actually best suits, you know, what you're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I've certainly been involved in large, you know, complex hospital renovation addition projects that in a traditional contract relationship, you know, our contract was with the owner, the construction company's contract was with the owner, all the engineering consultants and all design consultants were under our contract. All the subcontractor and vendor consultants were, or vendors were with the contractor. And still, you know, there was a commitment to a highly collaborative, highly transparent relationships. And they were very successful and were able to, you know, able to deliver complex projects with accelerated design schedules, multiple bid packages, early bid packages, and multi phases, mini phases. And, you know, again, it goes back to that idea of trust. But, you know, to pick up on what everyone's saying, I think talking to owners about these alternative methods, you know, I would start with explaining that, you know, that healthcare projects inherently are becoming more and more complex. There's more and more competition for systems to be, you know, to be first, to be fresh, to respond to market stresses, to respond to just societal pressures. Think of the last couple of years, what we saw different design teams provide to their clients to respond to COVID. And then, you know, the price of money is, you know, always a constant factor that needs to be, you know, thought about in these projects. And so I think there's you know, for me, you know, whenever we've had a contractor and major subcontractors on board at the beginning of a project, even at the site planning and you know, programming phases of projects, we've always had new voices at the table that were allowed you know, the client to hear how much, you know, what the cost and schedule impacts of design and planning decisions were, and then gave clients more data points with which to make decisions about, you know, about a project. It allowed for multiple options on projects to be, you know, priced rapidly. So you think in manufacturing about rapid prototyping, and you know, the design world needs to kind of adopt some of those manufacturing processes and think about, you know, how can we rapidly, you know, understand what the benefit of different options are, what the costs are, what the schedules impacts are of those options, and bring those solutions forward to clients so that they can make informed decisions. So, you know, for me, moving forward or advising a client whether to go to you know, from a traditional delivery method to an alternative delivery method, I would say that there's, you know, opportunities for just more informed voices in the design and construction process that will enable you, the client, to make better decisions and have better outcomes around cost and around schedule and around quality of your project.
Yeah, I wouldn't undervalue the role of a construction manager whose life is going to change probably more than ours is under these alternative methods around procurement, general conditions, You talked about, Sarah, pre-ordering materials by the owner instead of the contractor. How they buy jobs and produce jobs and price jobs is going to drastically change over the next several years. And so, we need them at the table with us as we sort of map out, our client's future.
Sure. A prefabrication approach to these large projects, a kit of parts approach, will completely change, the relationship of and the power of large construction companies, because how the owner buys products and buys projects, those relationships are going to change. And, what kind of contractor is required then to put all these parts together is going to change, right? And it's going to be interesting what happens to, the large healthcare construction companies and how they absorb, these new work streams into their projects, into their economic models.
Yeah, no, thank you all. It's a great place to pause there, right? There's a ton of variation in the marketplace. Everybody kind of has the sense with what's going on in the industry that there are better ways to do it. You said, Paul, right? You've been doing design build for 40 years. Not much of this is new, but the proliferation of it into different markets and different sectors definitely feels new, especially to some of our clients. And it all boils down to the team and making sure that you have some sort of contractual method and delivery method that everybody who's going to be involved can get on board with. Because if just one of those companies isn't able to deliver under the structure of the process, then it's not going to work, because the definition of collaboration is you need everybody there, right? Doing the same thing, working on the same stuff. So, what is this particular project's definition of success? What are the particular risks for the project, and who best holds that risk for this particular project, right? It might change. It might not just be one client does one delivery method. It might change from project to project depending on what the major drivers of that project are. So, but we'll end it here today. I want to thank Kurt and Sarah and Paul for your time. Of course, Angela for co-hosting with me. And on behalf of everybody else who's watching at home, thanks so much for your time and your expertise on this topic.